People love it, and we want to tell them thank you, and may we have some more. Can I hear you?
Public school advocates say they don't oppose school choice, but tax money belongs in traditional education.
We believe that public dollars should go to public entities, vis-a-vis public schools. We do not support the notion of allowing public dollars to go fund private schools. We do not support the false notion that if you apply to school A, that you're going to get into school A. There's no guarantee. But one thing is for certain. If your child is admitted to school A and your child is not able to perform at the level or the standards of school A, that child then goes back to their home public school. And we have no choice in who we accept and who we reject. We take everybody and we do the best that we can with every student that darkens our doors.
According to the school choice advocates, their programs increase student achievement and graduation rates and are therefore worthy of investment.
One united voice for
And that's our Capitol Report for this evening. Now on to tonight's leadership segment. We get a look inside the Democratic agenda with House Minority Leader Representative Stacey Abrams.
The Democrats have three prongs: economic security, educational opportunity, and individual responsibility. We believe that it's going to be critical for every piece of legislation to be evaluated through that lens. With economic security, it's not only about getting jobs for Georgians, which I think everyone agrees is the most important and pressing need, but it's also making certain that we don't do further harm to our citizens at a time of economic depression and economic recession. And for example, we have a concern about the Tax Council report. The Tax Council report, I think, offers very important changes to our tax policy, but it also recommends some changes that we think could be detrimental to the working families of Georgia, including taking the tax off of groceries and increasing the sales tax on other services. If you couple that with a cut in income tax for the wealthy, what you end up with is the poorer families in Georgia, those who make between $45,000 to $75,000, paying almost $500 more in taxes, but a wealthy family making $389,000, paying almost $8,000 less in taxes. And we believe it's important for Georgia to modernize, but not at the expense of those who are least able to support that change. I think our other part of economic security is looking at encouraging all Georgians to be active and engaged in the conversation about the budget. We talk about budget cuts, but what we're really talking about are budget choices. And those choices have to make sense for where Georgia is today and where Georgia wants to go tomorrow. If we don't invest in education, in infrastructure, in transportation, but also invest in our children, where they live and who they are, I think Georgia faces some very difficult days ahead. Our second policy idea and interest is educational opportunity. And that means that we no longer cut schools and cut education. It's not about simply teacher furloughs. It's about the number of days where our children aren't learning and therefore become less and less competitive in this market. I think it's also about protecting hope, which is a program that Democrats began and Democrats will work very hard to save. And we look forward to working with the majority party to create a policy that not only preserves hope, but also provides hope to all who need it. I think that it is incredibly opportunistic for us that this is a time where we can talk about tax policy and educational policy together, because as long as we separate the two, we have business on one side and families on the other. If we can talk about them together, we can talk about how Georgia can move forward together, because a strong business is only as strong as its workers, and workers are only as good as the jobs they can get. Our third point is individual responsibility, and that means whether we're talking about legislative responsibility or personal responsibility or corporate responsibility, we believe that an ethic of responsibility will change the state and move the state forward, and that's something we're going to push for.
Since Representative Abrams said education is a leading priority for Democrats, I asked her why the party feels that education is being underfunded when K-12 and higher education make up the largest portion of the state budget.
It's a matter of math. The math says that while more money has gone into the system overall as a percentage of the budget has actually declined. And so if you are getting more and more of less and less, overall you're getting less. And I don't think there is anyone who can quantifiably demonstrate that more money has gone into education. We have put more money into certain aspects of education, but overall the quality and the quantity of the services we provide to our students has declined. And I think if you ask any parent who no longer can put their child in band, any parent who looks for a gifted program opportunity, or any child who needs remedial education, you will find again and again that the resources they need to get those services no longer exist in Georgia, and that's a problem. Money matters when it comes to education. It's about the math. The more you invest The wiser you invest, the better your result. And we have to make sure that we're talking about both sides of that conversation. Not simply the money and not simply the management, but the money and the management together.
And education will remain on the primetime lawmakers' radar tomorrow when Scott sits down with education leaders from inside and outside the legislature. Reporting live from the Capitol, I'm in Wandy Lawson for Primetime Lawmakers.
And Wandy, before you leave, a little follow-up question for you this evening. I hear Governor Deal made a little news today about a possible endorsement for president in 2012. What are you hearing?
Oh, that's true. He told reporters after the Eggs and Issues breakfast that he had sat down with, of course, his good friend Newt Gingrich. They'd had a nice talk, and in fact, he had not received confirmation that, in fact, Newt would be running for president, but he said if he does, he will definitely be endorsing him.
They served in Congress together. They know each other, right?
Very well.
It's great talking to you. Thanks for that report this evening in Wandy. Primetime Lawmakers and Wandy Lawson joins us live for the Capitol each night. And after the short break, I'll be joined in studio by Buddy Darden, an attorney representing Georgia in the water wars, and political analyst Bill Crane with the consulting firm CSI Crane will be going in depth with the subjects raised at Eggs and Issues this morning and more, and what they mean for Georgia. So stay with us. We'll start with water.
Okay.
About that. Since we've got a couple of, I know you know a lot about it. I know more about it. And we'll dig into.
Sounds great.
Welcome back to Primetime Lawmakers. I'm Scott Slade. As we just saw in Wandy's report, the Georgia Chamber of Commerce held its annual Eggs and Issues breakfast this morning. Governor Nathan Deal, Lieutenant Governor Casey Cagle, and Speaker of the House David Ralston all addressed the crowd. And among the issues raised were the creation of an education advisory group, expanding the state reservoir system, and establishing a water supply task force. And joining us now live in the studio is Buddy Darden, a former U.S. representative and Georgia state legislator. Mr. Darden is the attorney representing Georgia's interest in the water wars in Alabama and Tennessee. Also with us this evening is political analyst Bill Crane with the consulting firm CSI Crane, a firm here in Atlanta, a veteran of many political campaigns, and he's a veteran of crisis management and so many other things. It's great to have you both with us this evening.
Thank you. Delighted to be here. I was a page of the legislature in 1955, so I've been watching them with great interest ever since that time.
I think 1963 or 64 for me, with Quimby Melton Jr. out of Griffin.
I was a Lawmakers intern, so.
There we are.
Yes.
So we're all
Been
hands
around
at
a
this.
little while.
Absolutely.
Well, let's start with water. You know, Governor Deal is talking about a Georgia water supply development program, and you know, it sounds like he's very aggressive in this, Buddy. You know, where do we go from here? You've been on the inside
That's
of all
what
this.
it's going to take, Scott. It's going to take aggressive leadership. You can't sit back and expect this situation to work itself out in the courts or for the governors just to come up with some agreement at the last minute. We've got to look out for ourselves, and the fact that Governor Deal is from the Gainesville area, where Lake Lanier is such a key to the economic success of the area as well as the entire North Georgia area, he is involved in this and he is committed. So it's good to see the governor take this on as an issue, and we will only solve the problem with leadership from the highest level, and that's the governor's office.
He's indicated before even taking office that he wants to aggressively meet with his counterparts in Alabama and Florida. Has any such meeting been set up yet?
Well, I got an indication from what he said today on the radio that he is working at it. Of course, I hope he's having meetings with them, not in the public light, because once they start announcing their meeting, then I think all the media attention and all the coverage that it has might be counterproductive. So I think it's good for the governors to open discussions, not only among themselves, but also through their surrogates, and I'm sure they're already working on it now. At least I hope so.
And Bill, that would be really one of the easiest ways out, for them to get together with a deal, right?
The governor of Florida and the governor of Alabama have much less, comparatively speaking, political experience in office than Governor Deal does, and less experience with the water issues. But they're sitting in the catbird seat because the judge's decision, Judge Magnuson's ruling, was basically in their favor. So there's got to be something put out that's in their benefit. And if we have more reservoir capacity, as an example, in Georgia, that's more water that goes into the aquifers, that's more water that goes back into the system downstream, and it has to be sold that way.
That's right.
If you raise the water table for Lake Lanier 1 foot, that's billions of more gallons that go into the lake and that go into the Chattahoochee River through the dam, Buford Dam, that eventually be used downstream.
At the same time, though, I believe that the appellate courts will give us a little wiggle room if we indicate that we're willing to negotiate and work it out, and Georgia comes across as a reasonable party. In the beginning, Georgia was not considered to be the reasonable party, but here lately, we've made some concessions and we've made some efforts. And again, the issue, though, has got to be leadership from the governor's office. Governor Nathan Deal has got to be the person out front to make this happen.
And the linkage, not to spend too much time on any one issue, when the oil spill occurred and all the Metro Atlantans didn't go to the beaches in the Florida Panhandle, you can see why Apalachicola, which is where the water ends up, cares about Atlanta, because there's a whole lot of economic ties, tourism and real estate ownership, et cetera. So you can't down there look upstream and say we can strangle Atlanta and we'll take the growth because it's interconnected.
And the cost of digging new reservoirs would just be prohibitive. I mean, we don't have the money to do that, do we?
Well, we've got to at least look at some options in that area. I don't think you're going to do enough reservoirs to totally solve the problem. At the same time, we ought to be looking at ways to increase our capacity at the same time.
Or accepting places.
Exactly.
Like the Vulcan Reservoir that's above northwest Atlanta that the city of Atlanta is going to turn into a park.
And already some are underdeveloped, but we've got to complete.
It'll be interesting to see what happens in the courts.
Yeah.
To move on just briefly, that who knows, it could even be thrown out on appeal, right? I mean, that could happen still. Okay, well, watch that. Among the issues raised in the Eggs and Issues breakfast this morning, creation of an education advisory group. The governor wants more input on how to get more out of our education bucks. Bill, what does that mean? He's reaching out, or?
Well, you may remember kind of the flip when Zell Miller was governor. He actually reached across the aisle and worked with a Republican superintendent of education and it was Linda Schrinko, involved her in more direct decision making. This governor has talked about wanting to give more local control back to the boards of education and superintendents, give them the money that they're going to get, but tell them they have more discretion in how to spend it. And I think this is a bridge to get there.
I think the governor has a real dilemma here, because I think his heart is with public school education, and I think he wants to see it grow and prosper. But at the same time, a lot of the leadership and a lot of his support is toward school choice and toward private school vouchers and other areas. And so I think the governor's walking a very narrow path here. I think his heart's in the right place, but at the same time, when he looks at the people who supported him during the election, he's got to at least accommodate them as well. And I think right now he has a luxury. He has a luxury of being able to say, let me get more input, let me think about it, because he's still on his honeymoon, and this would be no time to start choosing
First
among
Lady
your
Sandra
friends.
Deal was a teacher all
Absolutely.
of her professional career, so he gets a little bit of kitchen cabinet.
And
his parents
nearly have his bond packages for K through 12 education too. So yeah, he's in it. Stacey Abrams, the representative you heard say that she thinks education is underfunded. Are we getting what we're paying for now?
It's $10.6 billion of last year's budget. We don't know yet what the number will be this year. It's the largest line item. If you look at pre-K, which is where we really start all the way up through college, it's almost 2/3 of the budget. New Jersey spends twice per capita what we do and gets a bad result. I don't think it's solely about dollars.
But the state has a primary responsibility for the education of the workforce. And whatever it takes, we've got to make that commitment, not just in terms of dollars, but also giving it the legislative attention and, frankly, the status, doing what we can to raise the status of public education and train a workforce so that we've got the people who are qualified to do the jobs that are being created. Fortunately, we've been able to get enough imports in the last few years to take care of our high-tech jobs. We haven't been educating enough people to handle these jobs in this state.
We're talking about education, Hope Scholarship, shoring up the Hope Scholarship Fund is coming up over and over again. The actuaries are saying this thing's going to be in big trouble in a couple of years.
Well, it's in trouble now. They're in the reserves now.
Exactly, but I mean, to the point where we're going to have to start looking at not a full ride in tuition. Senator Jack Hill, Appropriations Committee Chairman, last night on this program said that the Georgia Lottery used to do a better job raising more money. Okay, do we need to find new ways to gamble?
Well, they keep on every year.
They're still growing.
It's a great success, and I don't think we can fault the lottery for what they've been doing. I think they run a pretty good operation. But the Georgia Lottery, and of course the Hope Scholarship, is the holy grail. And this has got to be
and a third
addressed.
rail.
A third rail. You're exactly right. It is to the state what Social Security is at the national level. And we are going to have to address this, and we're going to have to make it work. We've got to be very careful too, not to make it solely means tested. We've got to make some adjustments, sure, but at the same time, it needs to be based on merit. And I think the legislature realizes this, but at the same time, we've got to somehow maybe cut back in certain things that Hope does, but it's got to be there for everyone.
2 quick points. One is that there were a lot of things added on to Hope since it was created on merit. There's grants, there's remedial, there's second chance, and I think Senator Hill said some of those things have got to go. And then new revenue. There are states, 7 of them, that use video lottery terminals. They bring in Delaware, which has a sixth the population of the state of Georgia, $300 million. Rhode Island was $250 million in gaming revenues just on those video lottery terminals. Bingo, which Thurbert Baker was pushing when he was running for governor, letting churches and nonprofits bring some new types of folks who don't typically play the scratch game or the quick pick into the mix and bring in more revenue. Look at that, as well as the, cutting benefits. Look at new revenue options.
Okay. Well, as you know, it probably would not be necessary either for the legislature to pass an act which would authorize these machines. I think you could probably bring the machines in without additional
The Georgia
law.
Lottery Commission has
maybe
that
that's
authority.
what Senator Hill was talking about.
The Lottery Commission has that.
I don't know.
A lot of folks told me they could do that. Okay, we got about a minute left here, gentlemen. With the short budget and a new administration, we have a real atmosphere for change. We talked about maybe expanding gambling to a small. So what do you think, Bill? What's going to happen? Sunday
liquor sales. I think you're going to get a local referendum. I do think you may see the VLTs. I don't think you're going to see big tax increases. I don't think this governor is going to sign off on bringing sales tax back on groceries. But big things. Buddy, go ahead.
As you know, of course, the council now has completed its work. And the committees are somewhat hamstrung because they've either got to do the whole package or not. They can't just cut taxes and at the same time leave others alone. So I think you're going to see very little activity on this tax reform this time. I think we're going to have to study this
they've got
another
2 years.
year.
There's no timetable that we have to accept.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. There's some penal system reform as well, getting older inmates in the nursing homes, that sort of thing. So,
and nonviolent offenders getting released earlier.
Exactly. Well, thanks so much for joining us this evening.
And don't forget immigration.
Yes.
Oh yeah, that's big. And the State of the Union message tonight. Will the president pop some new infrastructure programs? A lot of people are waiting to hear 2 words.
That's right.
3 words: deepening Savannah Harbor this evening. So.
In Congress, they're calling this date night because Democratic members and Republican members are teaming up and going together.
You guys look great together this evening, by the way. It's great to see you this evening. Yeah, thanks so much for joining us. So coming up tomorrow on Prime Time Lawmakers, immigration reform legislation is expected to be introduced in the House. Among other things, the bill will require the use of the federal E-Verify program for private employers in the state. We'll continue our leadership interview series. Senate President Pro Tem Tommie Williams is scheduled to appear, plus in-depth analysis with legislative and policy experts in education and all the latest Capitol news. That's tomorrow night at 7. And coming up next to GPB, Bert Wolf Travels and Traditions. Tonight, Bert visits Holland. That's coming up next right here on GPB. Thanks to our guests for joining us. That's our broadcast for this 4th legislative day of the 2011 season. Thanks to Buddy Darden and Bill Crane, and for Mwandi Lawson and the whole Primetime Lawmakers team, I'm Scott Slade. Have a great night.
This is a GPB original production.
So I'll do a little news brief here. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks very much.
Is that for me?
Yeah, we could have gone. We could have gone a couple more minutes.
So cheap. I love it. Let's do this again.
Longer.
We could have gone a half an hour. Thanks so much for your energy and commitment. Thanks, buddy.
Oh, I love doing this.
See you later.
Call me anytime.
Thanks, bud. Yeah. Appreciate it.
You just leave your microphones on the chair.
Okay. I wasn't sure if we were just to give him back one.
Look at those flashbacks. They're just wonderful.
I will. Thank you.
It's worth investing an hour of your time just to go.
I bet they've got them on one disc. I can just
Oh, yeah,
look at
they
all
are.
of them.
See, what you can do is just go
sell
to the
'em.
website.
Okay. Oh, okay.
And they're sequential.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Shut up.
Okay, doke.
No, I'm talking about.
No, it's okay. You can tell me that. You have status.
Thanks a lot.
You have status.
Appreciate it. Take care. Thank you.
Oh, is everything good at 12?
Yes, I'll talk to you about it, though. Yeah, thank you. Boy, they gotta fix that stuff. Oh man, put all that trouble and don't get it on the air. Really? Oh man. Wow. New equipment blues, huh? Sure. Is there? Good evening, I'm Scott Slade, and this is a Primetime Lawmakers News Brief for January 25th, 2011, the fourth legislative day of the Georgia General Assembly. At the annual Eggs and Issues breakfast today, Governor Nathan Deal said water and education were two top priorities in his agenda. He announced plans to create an education advisory group and has tasked the Georgia Emergency Management Agency with developing and launching a water supply task force. Also, control of the Senate continues to be an issue at the Capitol. Today, a party line vote of the Senate made Senator Tommie Williams chair of the Committee on Administrative Affairs, but Lieutenant Governor Casey Cagle retained the power to appoint the majority of that panel. That will allow Cagle to negotiate the composition of the House Senate committee that will oversee redistricting this year. You can watch Primetime Lawmakers every night. The Georgia General Assembly is in session at 7 p.m. Sure. Okay. Sure. It's 7 p.m. and the following morning at 5:30 a.m. I'm Scott Slade, joining Wandy Lawson and me tomorrow night at 7. Primetime Lawmakers.